Alright, what's up everybody, it's your boy Duplays here, back with some more YouTube reactions for you guys. Today we're checking out Austin Evans, Valve's secret plan to end Windows. As we all know, Valve has been working on their translation layers. We've had Proton for years now. And now there's FEX for the Steam frame. That's x86 to ARM. What else? And then they have Lepton, which is their properly packaged version of Waydroid. So that's basically the ARM equivalent to Proton. So Proton for Steam Deck was, let me just start the video.
Valve has been secretly funding a small army of developers with a big goal: to replace Windows. Now, you probably saw the recent announcement of the Steam Machine along with the Steam frame and a brand new controller. But you could have easily missed something important. The frame runs on an ARM processor just like the one in your phone. How, you might ask? Did they get Windows games to run on the same chip out of a Galaxy S24? I mean, that should be impossible, right? The whole reason I wanted to make this video is that the other day I was reading what seems
He's going into it right now, the translation layers.
The Verge did with Pierre Liu, one of Valve's architects behind SteamOS and the Steam Deck. The more
him and Lawrence are like the most known people at Valve, other than Gaben himself, Lord Gaben himself.
Legitimately shocked at some of the casual mentions he was just dropping. Like, what? Excuse me? A key piece of this is he was just dropping. Like, what?
I want to see those things again. Loading the segments of code into memory. The code coming from the app is all x86. And so Proton is a facilitator. It puts existing code of the app in a... I can't read that the Linux OS can understand. I'm guessing this is executing that code. Yeah, I'm not going to get to read all that.
A key piece of this
You'll go into it, I'm sure.
Translator designed to turn instructions meant.
Right. So, I'm going to finish what I said at the beginning of the video. And then just let it play out. So, FEX. Alright, so Proton was x86 to x86. Because the Steam Deck has an x86 chip. The only issue was it was running Windows, so it had to translate the APIs. I almost said AI there. No, it has to translate the system calls, the Windows system calls into the Linux equivalent, so the software could run. But on a hardware level, they were both x86 chips. But with the Steam frame, it's x86 to ARM. So you're translating the x86 games, PC, Windows games to the ARM chip. And then you have another layer of abstraction. You have to translate from Windows system calls to Linux. So there's more overhead there. The only thing is with Lepton, because they're planning on adding native Android app support on the Steam frame, that's ARM to ARM. Because Android is obviously ARM CPUs. And the Steam frame is ARM. So it has the hardware support. So that would just translate the system calls from Android to Linux, the ones Linux can understand. So Lepton would be just like Proton, except Lepton is like the ARM translation, and then Proton is the x86 translation. Even though it's not translating the code, it's just the system calls, because they both use the same processor with those two translation layers. Let me go over that again, because I know it's a bit confusing. Lepton is translating, allowing you to run Android apps on the Steam frame, which already has an ARM processor. So on a hardware level, it can execute the code. It's just a software that needs translation. Same for Proton, x86 to x86. It's Windows to Linux. Hardware level, same CPU, so it can execute the code natively. It just needs to emulate the OS, which would be Windows. Linux emulating Windows, not emulating, but translating, running Windows applications through system calls. Yeah, let's continue.
It is something that mobile ARM chips can process. Now, I've been vaguely aware of this project because it's bubbled up a couple times over the last year, especially, but I had no idea that Valve didn't just support FEX. It was their idea. They have been funding the developers of FEX since the beginning back in 2018. That is
I graduated high school in 2018. It's been 7 years, man.
Quietly paying open source developers to solve a problem that most people didn't even know existed. Now, Microsoft has an enormous team building Windows on ARM, and here, Valve are paying open source enthusiasts to build their own version. This was kind of crazy to me. I mean, I knew that Valve helped contribute to a lot of projects that ultimately made things like steamos possible. But when I really started going down the rabbit hole, holy shit. Back in 2022, a few months after the Steam Deck was released, Valve told The Verge that they were already funding over 100 open source developers. Who knows how many they're working with at this point? And these aren't Valve employees. They are incredibly smart and passionate devs from all around the world working on very specific problems. Maybe someone's working on graphics drivers for GPUs, someone's working on DirectX translation, someone's working on CPU emulation, like, you get the idea. And this code, it is open source. That means that anyone can use it, anyone can contribute to it, and anyone can build on top of it. It means that the entire Linux gaming community is testing their code, filing bug reports, and submitting patches. They're getting thousands of hours of QA for free. And while everyone benefits from these improvements, Valve control the platform. They are not locking people into Windows. They're establishing their stack, and therefore Steam, as the standard. All of this because Valve saw an existential threat from Microsoft over a decade ago, and instead of just reacting to it like a normal company would, they spent years building the tool to make Windows optional and maybe even irrelevant.
Before I explain how all of this works, let me just show you. Because this tech, it's not theoretical. It exists right now and you can try it for yourself. So this is the Red Magic 11
Game Hub. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's the Game Hub app. So he's gonna show him running Windows games, Steam games on Android, which is obviously the ARM chip. So we're gonna see the trend of FEX, not FEX itself. Well, I think Game Hub, it's the same tech essentially.
With the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 5 processor, and I'm going to run a full Windows Steam.
Wait, there's a Snapdragon 8 Gen 5? I thought Gen 3 was a max. Gen 5. Is there a Gen 6? Wait, no, this video was released 9 hours ago. Yeah. 2026. Alright, so it's not out yet. Okay. 36%, 11% GPU. Okay. Alright, let's let him cook. Let's let Austin cook.
It's serious business. It has an actual water cooling loop as well as an active fan, which I'm sure you can hear. This thing is quite powerful in all the good and the bad ways. But we wanted to use this to kind of give this the best possible shot, because what we're taking advantage of right now is an app called Game Hub. Now it is using FEX on the back end, right? Which of course is an open source project. We're gonna talk a lot about sort of how that all works.
You know, on a hardware and software level, there should be nothing stopping you from installing SteamOS on this, seeing that they ported it to ARM for the Steam frame.
That this is not the Valve certified version of this whole process, right? This is something that a third party has built. It is running on Android, not SteamOS, which will theoretically give more performance benefits. It will be much more optimized. But I want to just show you what happens when I load an actual game from my real Steam library on my phone. Let's see here. I'm gonna do the low preset, everything off.
It doesn't get more impressive than this.
Like the Switch 1 version. This is The Witcher 3. It is not a super smooth experience. So if you look on the bottom left corner, you'll see that I'm getting notionally 40 to 50 FPS. However, there's quite a lot of sort of input latency, as well as there's definitely some hitching. As you can see here, it's not the smooth experience, even though theoretically we're playing this at 50 FPS. But I just really want to emphasize,
literally natively too.
Full Windows game designed for
PC, yeah.
GPUs that is running inside of an Android app. The amount of translation, the amount of graphic support, the amount of things you need to do as a
Is it freezing there?
to make something.
I think it crashed. Yeah, exactly.
It's really tremendous. I'm gonna not play that again. Why don't we play a different game? One of the games
It's literally a Steam Deck.
Probably one of the most well sorted is Stray. So again, we're loading it from Steam.
And it's in the early stages too, so there's gonna be a bigger hurdle than Proton, because at least with Proton on the Steam Deck, it was the same chip architecture. That alone eliminates so many problems. But with this, it's like 2 layers of abstraction. The different CPU architectures being the biggest one, so there's some overhead, but with time it'll improve.
My actual Steam account, which I will say you may want to be a little.
And then naturally, the upcoming phones will get more powerful to compensate for that. So there'll be improvements in the efficiency of the translation, which I believe are already being implemented. I think Valve said there's no translation done on the GPU and only CPU. Obviously, because it's the code execution that's the main thing. And what else? Oh, and the fact that the phones are going to get more powerful. So it's going to get more efficient, the translation, and the phones are going to get more powerful and be able to handle more. So yeah.
Your Steam account, but for the purposes of this, we're gonna give it a shot. Oh, we're here. We're in. Like, this looks actually really good. Hello. Doop 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 doop.
What game is that?
I'm a very dangerous cat. Meow. So this is a Windows x86 game running on an Android phone with an ARM processor. Like, I want to be clear, it's janky, but it fundamentally works. Imagine how this will be on SteamOS hardware. Let me show you what Valve actually built, because when I say they replaced Windows, I mean they replaced everything to do with Windows. So let's start up here at the top with the operating system. Windows has been around.
Yes, he's finally getting to like the technical aspects of it. I love these drawings, by the way. Why am I using my finger and not the mouse? So you guys can see what I'm actually pointing at.
And what SteamOS really is based on Linux. So Linux is a free and open source operating system.
It is Linux.
And that is, in a lot of ways, actually kind of the simple part, right? There are lots and lots of Linux distributions. What makes SteamOS special is all the other stuff that they've built underneath that. This brings us to Proton. So this, if you've used a Steam Deck, is something you've probably heard about. This is based on an older piece of tech called Wine. It really just comes from back in the old Linux days where people were frustrated that Windows apps weren't being ported to Linux. So like, hey, what if we just made a middleman to help trick apps and now games into thinking that it's still running on Windows when you're in fact running on Linux. So essentially, every time the game calls for something to say, hey, go out to the storage and get me this.
This is what I was talking about with the system calls. So yeah, listen carefully, guys.
Something that is natively supported on Linux. It's really.
It essentially looks for the Linux equivalent to that system call.
It's taken years to get to this point, but it has gotten incredibly good. This is
Yeah.
why Steam Deck games run so well right out of the box, even though pretty much every game you play on a Steam Deck just thinks it's a Windows game. Because it is a Windows game. There's just no Windows involved.
It is.
So we have.
Some of the games, particularly the Lego ones, it won't say quit to desktop, it says quit to Windows. And I just like chuckle to myself when I see it because I'm like, I'm playing on a Steam Deck, but you don't know that.
This is where DirectX comes in. So
Which kind of makes me wonder, why didn't the devs just put quick to desktop? I know it's designed for Windows, so they're not wrong, but still, just put quit to desktop. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're not doing anything wrong. That's just me being nitpicky. Never mind. Let's continue.
The reason this is important is that it standardizes everything. So if you're a developer making Halo, you don't have to make your Halo game for NVIDIA PCs and AMD PCs and Intel PCs. As long as you're making it to the DirectX standard, it should be pretty much universal. It might not surprise you to know that there's no DirectX for Linux, which is why Valve have helped to create a number of.
What API does Linux use for ARM graphics? I believe it's Mesa.
DXVK,
MESA.
VKD3D. These all run.
Oh, my bad. It's Vulkan. Yeah. Mesa is are the drivers for the GPU. My bad. Well, it uses Vulkan.
But basically, the same way that Proton sort of tricks the Windows APIs into actually thinking that it's a Windows PC when it's really running on SteamOS, that's kind of what these things are doing as well, right? So it's translating all those instructions that the game is expecting to go to DirectX, and it's actually going into a much more Linux-friendly form. Basically, you could sum this whole chart into everything thinks it's Windows, and nothing is actually Windows. It's all a layer of lies,
Yes.
deception, and somehow it actually works. Now you might be wondering, why? Why spend over a decade building all of this? Well, the answer goes back to 2012 and a fundamental threat that Valve saw coming. It was a very different time. Windows 8 had just launched, and it was controversial. Not only had Microsoft heavily reviewed the excellent Windows
I remember those
more
days.
friendly for tablets, even if you had a giant desktop display, but they also introduced the Windows Store.
Now, this is the first time that Microsoft had ever built an app store directly into Windows. They also began pushing this thing called the Universal Windows
That's so
Platform,
nostalgic.
basically laying the groundwork to make
I remember
it
that.
work like iOS, where all apps would go through their store. Gabe Newell, Valve's co-founder, did not f around. He called Windows 8, quote, a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space. Valve was
It's funny too because Gabe actually worked for for Microsoft. I said worked for Windows. Worked for Microsoft before leaving and doing his own thing with Valve. So that's, of course, he'd have a strong opinion on that.
highly reliant on Steam running on Windows. So if Microsoft did decide to lock things down, Valve's business would have been crushed essentially overnight. So they started building a backup plan. In 2013, just a few months after Gaben started sounding the alarm bells publicly, Valve announced SteamOS and Steam Machines. The pitch was simple: Linux-based gaming devices that didn't need Windows at all. By 2014, progress had been made, but fast forward to 2015 when Steam Machines were actually ready to launch, and it was a disaster. They were expensive, and unlike SteamOS of today, they did not support Windows games back then. Every game had to be ported specifically to Linux, which meant that the library was tiny. And frankly, no one really understood what the point of a Steam machine actually was. So when Microsoft backed off the idea of a walled garden with Windows 10, crisis averted, right? But Valve kept building. And here's the most valuable lesson they learned with the failure of the first Steam machines. You can't ask developers to do extra work. They're just not going to port their games to Linux or recompile them for ARM. I mean, the market is just too small, the effort is too high, and it just is not worth it for a market that isn't proven. So Valve made an incredibly smart call on hindsight. If you can't ask developers to do the extra work, you can just do it for them. Now to do this, they had to build the tools to replace Windows from the ground up, so game doesn't even realize that it's not running on a traditional gaming PC. Just rebuild decades of work and the fundamentals of what makes a computer a computer. No big deal. Valve weren't just building an alternative, they were building insurance. Fast forward to today, and Valve's long-term bets are finally paying off. And guess what? Microsoft is waking up. Recently, they published this blog post highlighting what they've done for PC gaming in 2025 and some plans for the future. Now there's good stuff here, continuing to optimize Windows for handhelds and presumably consoles, improving ARM support, DirectX advances. I mean, it all sounds familiar, right? If you saw a review of the ROG Xbox Ally, you'll know that while there's promise, Windows is still far from where it needs to be on handhelds.
Yeah, they really need to get working on. Well, I'm sure they're in the process of doing that, but we need it to be SteamOS-ified. We need that sleep. We need those deep control layout settings that SteamOS has. We need everything, the convenience of SteamOS with the full compatibility of Windows. And I honestly think it would be nice if they actually made a cut down separate version of Windows from the regular desktop. I know they just disabled the processes, which is cool and all, but on the Xbox Ally, when you exit the big picture mode, FSE, I should say big picture mode, that's actually Steam's thing. That's what they call it. Xbox full screen experience, which is the ROG Ally's UI, which is really just the Xbox app. When you exit to go to desktop mode and then you want to go back, you have to restart to shut those processes off. That's kind of annoying. They should design it to the point where when you switch back to Xbox mode, it disables those processes. But I imagine that's incredibly complex to implement, and they're probably working on it. And then I'm wondering, maybe they don't plan to work on that. Maybe they're just going to leave that as is. Because having to reboot, because if I want to set up mods or files, which is something I do on the Steam Deck pretty often when I'm setting up my emulators. Well, when I used to, not as much anymore. Every now and then I'll download a new game that I never play. But for the most part, all of that work has been done. Setting up a Steam Deck is literally work. I would never wipe my Steam OS partition because it's so much to do. I'm going to have to clone it whenever I get some new hardware just so I have enough space. And I would need a 2 terabyte drive for that anyway. So there's also that. But yeah, they need to... Sleep is a big one. We need sleep. What else do we need? Desktop mode is fine. It would have been nice to have trackpads, but we can use an analog stick, I guess. But yeah, and we need the TD. Well, we already have the TDP settings with each handheld's proprietary power management software. The ROG Ally has Armory Crate. Legion Go has Legion Space, and then Steam Deck has its TDP quick access menu. So that's fine.
You're dealing with multiple storefronts,
Exactly, there it is.
And you still have to rely on Windows desktop sometimes on your 7-inch screen. Meanwhile, SteamOS on the Steam Deck, it feels just like a console, and it works. Games sleep and resume reliably. Updates are seamless. It is just a better experience than Windows.
And then another thing with Windows, so there's so many different updates, places you have to download updates from. You have to download updates from NVIDIA Drive. There's a driver section in Armory Crate. I think I saw one video once. And then you have to install Windows updates. And then BIOS updates in another part of the ROG's Armory Crate software. I think it was 4 different places you had to go to. That's irritating as hell. With the Steam Deck, it's not just one. Unless you go into desktop mode, because there are updates that show up in the Discovery Store. It's just those 2 places, and that's when you do go in desktop mode. Sometimes I will see something labeled SteamOS in desktop mode, very rarely though. It's not an often thing. But for the most part, if you're in gaming mode, you press update, it'll just install everything, and you're good to go. So, simplicity.
And I think Microsoft know it. I've had conversations with people inside of Microsoft, and I do know that they're spending a lot of time and effort on overhauling Windows, not only for the Xbox Ally, but likely for the next-gen Xbox, which would be way more of a PC than any console they shipped before. And I want to be clear, this is great. Competition makes everyone better. We all win here, with Valve making legitimately excellent options to game on, and Microsoft trying to turn Xbox into something really different than anything we've seen before. But I've got to admit, I missed the last piece of the puzzle. I have to say, I slightly question how seriously are Valve really going to be able to take bringing SteamOS to third parties. Now I say this.
Bro, if anti-cheat wasn't an issue, the Steam Deck would literally be perfect, software-wise.
I mean, the Steam Deck is the way I play games these days. Sure, having my Steam library largely just work out of the box is a big part of it, but the way that, in my opinion, they've gotten traction so far is because they have straight up made a better product. When Valve first announced that they were bringing SteamOS to third-party hardware, I was like, can they actually support this? I mean, Valve has 350 employees versus Microsoft's 228,000. I mean, how could they possibly hope to compete? But here's where I was wrong. Microsoft has a massive legacy Windows code base that goes back decades, not to mention layers of management. I mean, like, gaming is always going to be a small consideration of the overall Windows story. Valve has a singular focus: games. They have a small core team, a significant bench of open source developers, and no shareholders demanding short-term profits. Look, most companies would have killed SteamOS after Steam machines flopped in 2015. At that point, there was no clear path forward, and with Microsoft backing off the walled garden, crisis averted, time to move on. But Valve kept investing, kept building, which eventually led to the success of the Steam Deck and beyond. So what happens next? I think optimizing Steam games for ARM makes a lot of sense on the frame. Let's not forget, this is first and foremost meant to stream games from your PC, and it just so happens to play some stuff natively. It is a
You see, this is the hardware I'm really excited for. Sorry, I'm on my phone, guys, but I'm listening and keeping up. Yes, it's a streaming device first, but it has the onboard hardware. I'm buying one. I'm definitely buying one. I'm gonna watch so many movies with this thing. So many.
low stakes way to test tech like
And game, of course.
no one will be that upset. The game is just a little bit buggy for now. But there's no reason it stops there. An ARM-powered Steam Deck that takes advantage of all the compatibility work from the frame, with a smaller and lighter chassis and way better battery life, yeah, that's probably coming. This is why I'm so excited about the future. FEX makes so many things possible. Will we see the full version of Steam with all of your games on Android? A Steam phone? Maybe. I mean, why stop at replacing Windows when you could run Steam on, almost anything? Valve is doing amazing work, but it is a bad idea to count Microsoft out yet. When they get serious about something, they have the resources to make really cool stuff far beyond what we've seen with just something like the Xbox Ally. I mean, I would be genuinely surprised if Microsoft just let Valve have free reign in the gaming space. So yeah, it's a challenge. Your move, Microsoft. Now, if you enjoyed this, definitely be sure to ring-a-ling that ding-a-ling and check out our video on the future of Xbox.
Pause, Austin. You said ding-a-ling. That means something else.
I'll be covering this story a whole lot more in the near future. It is truly, truly a wild.
And I'll be following up with that. All right, guys, that was it. That was your boy Austin Evans talking about what are we talking about? Yeah, Valve's plan to end Windows. I was gonna say Steam Frame and Steam Machine, but it's really everything, to be honest. All right, I just want an operating system that's not a bloated mess that I can use on my hardware that lets me game, and you have that. All right, we hear you gamers, so therefore we will make recall for games, your own AI that guides you and tracks every keystroke you do. That's crazy. Alright, let's see what else. If Valve can work on getting a deal with anti-cheating so people can play their Call of Duties and Battlefield's. I said that. I literally said that. This is the biggest issue. That. Anti-cheat. If that's fixed, they're done. Windows is done. Microsoft also has the majority of the world's most creative and prolific enshittification specialists. They're incredibly skilled, focused, and capable of turning even the best idea into something users will loathe and despise if they think it might nudge that line up just a bit faster for those almighty shareholders. Yes, yes, yes. Rip Lamar Wilson. I knew that was coming. Valve's secret plan to replace Windows Step 1 be better than Windows. There is no Step 2 and they already completed Step 1. Okay, this comment is really interesting. Valve bringing Steam to ARM phones and devices means portable PC gaming in billions of pockets. Who cares about Switch 2 when everything's a Steam Deck? Let's see what the follow-up comments had to say. Half-Life on the cell phone would be dope. Imagine playing Counter-Strike 1.6 while you're on the bus talking to people, planting and defusing bombs. Still, you legally can't play any Nintendo games on any Steam Deck. That's not going to change. Other developers working on porting games to ARM chips. ARM-based chips actually is profitable for Nintendo Switch since the Switch and Switch 2 use ARM-based chips. Also, Switch 2 emulation is going to take some time to become as good as Switch emulation is, and even that isn't perfect yet. As long as the only way to play the Nintendo exclusives remains the Switch 2, none of this matters for Nintendo. Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, guys, that was it. That was my reaction to that. I'm going to see you on the next one. Deuces. Or goodbye.